Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and I'm here to talk to you about the history of Doctor Strange, part one of a two-part quick series.
Dr. Stephen Vincent Strange is the firstborn of Eugene and Beverly Strange. His birth date is in November of 1930. While Steve Ditko, the co-creator of Doctor Strange, was born on the 2nd of November, and we could always speculate, the fact is that we don't truly know. While their occupation is unknown, Bev and Eugene did own a farm in Nebraska, so perhaps they were Cornhuskers? They were on vacation in Philly when Bev gave birth to Stephen. In West Philadelphia he was born and raised. On the playground is where he spent most of his days. Chillin' and maxin', relaxin' all cool, and shootin' some b-ball. Wait a second, that's not correct. Eugene was a very strict father. He broke no silliness from his children. Stephen once developed a love for stage magic, and Eugene would have none of that. So strict was he that one time Stephen came home with an award from winning a spelling bee, and Eugene was not happy that accepted such a silly reward. When Stephen was 9, he was afflicted with horrible demonic nightmares. In fact, these nightmares even began to happen during the day. Now this is retroactive to his actual story, Baron Mordo, while still under the tutelage of the Ancient One, and before Doctor Strange had actually come. But, having seen the bit of the future, and knowing that Stephen Strange was the potential pick of the Ancient One, he actually went back in time and placed monoliths of demonic fear inside of Doctor Strange's memory. There are images of young Stephen drinking as early as 17, however, we can assume from the story that he actually began drinking much sooner than this. Bev and Eugene had 2 more children. 2 years after Stephen, Donna was born in 1932, and a couple of years after that is all the information that we have about Victor being born. The official Marvel handbook is vague, to say the least. Of his family, Donna would prove to be the most influential. When she was 9, she twisted her ankle while roller skating, and Stephen was able to help, inspiring him at a very early age to pursue a career in medicine. Voted most likely to succeed in high school, Stephen went on to med school. Later, when he was 19 years old, he came home for vacation from med school. Donna wanted to show Stephen off by taking him to the lake with her friends. She went away from everyone else and got a major cramp that led to her sinking. Stephen was the only one to see her go down, and he jumped in.
He spent a half an hour looking for her body. This gave him an idea of just how fickle life could be.
He became more stalwart after this, much as his father was. As if matters couldn't get any worse, his mother died while he was in residency. While he did go back to see her, all his training, he wasn't able to save her. Her last words to him were, "Take care of Victor," which was his only remaining sibling. 2 years later, Vic would call Stephen and tell him that their father was now on his deathbed. Stephen, nearly as emotionless as a statue at this point, didn't go, not even to the funeral. His excuse was that he was snowed in to his New York apartment, and there was no way that he could get to the airport, least off would they take off. The very next day, Vic showed up at his door. So much for that excuse. To make matters worse, when Vic did show up, Stephen was with a woman, and that's no way to mourn. Victor was so angry that he stormed off. Stephen got dressed and followed, only to see that Vic was hit by a car right outside. He never saw it coming.
Now here's where it gets really weird.
Strange bought a small warehouse and a cryogenic tube with all the bells and whistles and placed Vic inside. He was dead, but he hoped that science would make some kind of advances that would help him out. At best, to cure him from being hit by a car. He put the money to maintain this place for years in a private, untouchable fund. More on this later. Strange now had no surviving family, which is one of the requirements for being a superhero, unless your name is Peter Parker. Strange became the best physician of his time, specializing in neurosurgery. He made speeches, public appearances, shook hands with very influential people, and became the guy everyone knew. He'd only take the cases of rich and powerful people, so that word would spread and he'd get more top-dollar patients, turning down poorer clients all the time. Everything was about him, and besides his smarts, he had the steadiest hands anyone had seen.
And then he lost it all.
The exact accounts of his car accident are numerous and differ slightly from writer to writer. The roads were wet, he was driving too fast, he was drunk. In the movie, he was preoccupied. It was even suggested in one magazine that he tried to commit suicide. Whatever the case, the end result is the same. His hands were damaged beyond repair. In the miniseries The Oath, Dr. Nicodemus West was named as the surgeon who prevented Stephen's hands from being amputated. Stephen Strange, through all the operations and corrective surgery and the rehab that he went through, was never able to hold a scalpel steady again. Stephen exhausted his funds looking for a cure that didn't exist, even going so far as to try experimental science and pseudoscience. Everyone, it seemed, took advantage of his desperation, but as desperate as he still had too much pride to become a consultant and share the credit of working on a patient. So, he fell into squalor. Some stories even relate that he took back alley deals to work on some patients. He did this for nominal fees, mostly just to be able to keep up his bar tab. Much like with Tony Stark, alcohol played a big part in his downfall. While in the pub in the seedy docks of New York City, he heard some sailors talking about a mysterious master who could do amazing things, like make people walk again. Camartage was the place that he was told to go. Now, while in the first comic it said that Camartage was in India, and in later comics it would indicate that it was in the Himalayas, specifically an area that is now known as Tibet. What doesn't differ is that Stephen Strange would spend his last remaining dollar, literally, in order to get to Camartage, simply to meet a man called the Ancient One. You too can join the Comic Book University simply by subscribing below. And by the 12 rings of Ragador, guys, class dismissed.